This is something I think I originally presented perhaps at seminar one, as long as 16 or 17 years ago. I have periodically updated it, but of course the concept, lifelong learning for lifetime success, would always apply. I think most of the updates were here on the title slide, just adding new certifications, because I'm working on that wraparound business card. I figure you got to get your money's worth and use both sides of the card. I will share with the audience that I will provide a PDF file of the slideshow. So it's not really necessary to take notes or whatever. If you wanted to capture everything, I will make sure that we all have a copy of that after the event. The formal agenda for tonight's session that we will accomplish within the next hour is to start out with strategic planning. I'm a huge advocate of the top-down planning hierarchy. In fact, that was my original introduction to APEX in 1996 when I had a regular job. And of course, the last time I had a regular paycheck. But one of my coworkers had talked to me about this APEX thing, and he said, we keep talking about the higher level stuff, the strategy. And he said, what are we doing in logistics planning, Ford? How does this tie into the company's higher level goals? Not only am I a huge fan of strategic planning at businesses, but as well in our personal lives. And I am trusting, since we have a professional audience, I'm trusting everybody does strategic planning for their life. If not, that will be the homework assignment that I will trust John and Olivia to follow up on at next month's meeting. As part of strategic planning, we look at product life cycles. So when we do personal strategic planning in our lives, we need to think of where we're at. During the introduction, some of us noted how proud we are to be graybeards. So we know we're always learning. And there's never a point, regardless of how many certifications I get, I'm never going to think that there's nothing I can't learn. I'm always looking to learn from others. And that includes talk about choices that we make over the course of our career and how that influences what type of decisions we make with our lifetime strategies. We'll also present some examples of conflicts, recognizing conflicts are not necessarily a bad thing. We know conflicts will occur. If we're willing to bring them forward and discuss them, that's the only way you can resolve a conflict. When you bury a conflict, it suggests you're maybe engaging in the fight or flight syndrome, and that's not good. So we know there will be differences of opinions. We can bring them to the service and resolve them. And we'll have an individual exercise when we get to that point. So you may wish to make sure to have a pencil or paper handy for that. We'll discuss the goals, the performance objectives that we set up. So we measure ourselves. I've always been a huge fan of being measured. I tend to be a very assertive, borderline aggressive person in my pursuit of my life's goals. So I appreciate having targets. I like the idea of raising the bar and pushing myself to get better over time. And our final discussion will be with regard to education and training, and do a comparison or contrast of those two different concepts. And because we have such a super huge crowd and so many different APEX chapters and ASQ sections, and we've got Hank Barr coming all the way from the West Coast, you're going to get a special treat tonight. Within the next hour, I will solve all of your problems, personal or professional, by the end of this presentation. And this was free, mind you. We'll start with the strategic planning. And here's an opportunity for audience engagement. If anyone wishes to type into the chat line, and I'll look for Ken to give me feedback on this. We start with a vision and a mission statement. And I have worked at companies that are as a regular employee or as a consultant or trainer. And I have witnessed where companies or individuals try to use these terms interchangeably. They are separate, distinct items. If anybody wishes to type something into the chat, and Ken, if you see them, please feel free to just speak up and suggest what the distinction is between a vision and a mission statement. Greatly appreciated for volunteers to step up here.
You got it.
I know we must have at least dozens of people who can appreciate the contrast.
So the first one is from Jonathan. He says, vision is what the company envisions for it. Mike says, vision, dream of what can be. I like that.
Yeah, it's how we seek to be recognized. It's some future state of being, how we aspire to be recognized. So I like it how our suggestions have been very forward thinking.
There's another two, Mike. Mission. Now go for it, Mike. And then vision is where you want to go. Vision is where you want to go. Mission is how you're going to get there. That's from Todd Ziegler. Excellent answer also.
That is excellent. So perhaps my vision is I wish to go join Hank Barr on the West Coast for a drink. So that's my vision. I envision myself sitting there having a beer with him. The mission is, how am I going to get there? The path to get there. So how do I attain my vision? The mission defines that. The environment I compete in and my core competencies. If you successfully execute your mission statement, you would ideally attain your vision. And some of the things I talk about will be subject to periodic review and update. In theory, we would suggest that a vision and mission are somewhat permanent or to infinity. Or what I like to say is, as long as your organization continues to exist in an environment that continues to exist, then your vision and mission statement should still be good. So it's not like we update these on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. It usually requires something major. Your company was bought out, or you bought another firm, or technology changed a lot, or something really disrupted the supply chain. In other words, maybe the recession of 2007 and 8, and maybe year of the COVID called for an update to vision and mission statement. After we have done that, we do an analysis of our competitive priorities. So I had mentioned we should do strategic planning in our personal life. So you should have a vision of where you want to be, and you should have created a mission statement for this. And then you examine your competitive priorities, what it is that sets you apart from the rest of the pack. There's another presentation I've done, some of you may be familiar with, Purpleosity. It's how to be purple. How do you stand out from the crowd? And that is actually based on Seth Godin's book on the purple cows theory. He said, if you were ever driving down the road and you saw a herd of purple cows, that would be remarkable. You would remark on that. You stop at the Dunkin' Donuts or 7-Eleven and you're going to tell everybody, I just saw a herd of purple cows. It causes you to remark. So I'm going to challenge everyone on our session tonight. What are you going to do to be purple? How will you compete and stand out from the crowd?
Mike, I should have worn my purple shirt today. Damn. There are a couple of other comments, by the way, in here that say, let's see, vision focuses on tomorrow, mission on today, and what the organization does. Also, I feel they should be relevant. I feel they should always be relevant. ID your assumptions in your vision. And then somebody just wrote, sorry, Amy, so sorry. I think that's all I see for comments. So
all right.
Sorry, I'll let you jump back in again.
So I appreciate how a vision is described with nouns and adjectives. All right, nouns and adjectives, it's a state of being. It's a place I want to be. A mission is described with verbs and adverbs. It suggests actions, things I'm going to do. And we will perform a SWOT analysis. SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that comprises environmental scanning, both internal and external environmental scanning. The internal is identifying strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats, identifying the external environment. I believe that people and business organizations are similar in this regard. You would think that internal environmental scanning would be the easier of the two actions. But I think in practice, companies and people are better at external scanning. They're better at the external analysis. Another opportunity here for anyone to type into the chat. So please suggest, why would you think that it turns out that in practice, external scanning is the easier of the two instead of internal? Do we have any volunteers who can suggest something for this?
I am watching the chat window, folks. Type away. By the way, Mike, someone wrote vision and mission statements need to be reviewed for relevance. Okay, so let's
And
see.
while we're waiting for a comment on the external and internal scanning, I will share something. Be very careful when you watch or read a mission statement that says something like, we will aspire to be the premier provider of products to our marketplace while recognizing how important our customers are and treating our employees as our most valuable resource while providing sustainability efforts to the environment. As touchy-feely as that statement was, what business am I in? Am I manufacturing, distribution, service, nonprofit, government? Be careful with these ones that try to make it sound like you're just all things to all people. Those are those mission statements that are written for the back of a business card or for a banner on the website, or to look really cute when somebody comes into the office and sees it hanging over the receptionist's desk. You cannot be all things to all people. It's not the nirvana. You need to think specifically how we compete.
Love
Let me
it.
ask if we have gotten suggestions.
Yes.
Why external scanning tends to be easier.
So let's see. There are some comments here. I'll read them to you quickly. It says nothing personal is the first thing that was written, and then there's another one. It's harder. It's much harder to be introspective. Another one says easier to be objective on external SWOT, SWOT. Similar to self-examination, people don't like the internal evaluation. And internally, we get placid and acceptance of the status quo.
Yep.
And then they wrote add writing. And another one, you can find external from public data. Internally, you may get a variety of truths. And then the last one, which is Keith, that was John Sawyer, by the way, and Keith Launchberry wrote, we have a hard time realistically assessing our own strengths and weaknesses. So those are all the comments to date.
I think we've seen a lot of consistency here, recognizing it's tough to look in the mirror. And it could be a bias, it could be groupthink mentality or the status quo, or we always think things will be the way they've always been. So it's really tough. I am not making a plug for consultants. I'm not making a plug for work here, but that does suggest the value in hiring a third-party consultant to come in and help you with the SWOT analysis. And perhaps when we do our strategic planning in our personal life, you could enlist a friend, and I mean a true friend. A true friend is honest. I'm at the point in my life, so I know somebody who's always just glad handing me, oh, Mike, things are going great. You're wonderful. What a great guy you are. Well, I like to think I am, but this is a person who's just a butt kisser. All right. A true friend is the type of person who will say, hey, Ford, you got a booger on your nose. You better take care of that before your next training session. Good friends will be honest and provide a critique. And that will include not just compliments, but constructive criticisms. If they leave out the constructive criticisms, how on earth can I improve? And I think for our instructors who have taken Train the Trainer, you may recall that was some of the most challenging things, critiquing the other students' presentations. But it is a valuable opportunity for honesty. So I thank everyone for the suggestions with that. And I'm going to suggest in our personal lives, an annual plan is appropriate. So perhaps with the new year, we find an opportunity to update our career goals, maybe go on a diet, decide we're going to lose weight, or start thinking about opportunities for learning. Are we going to sign up for courses, certifications, workshops, or dinner meetings? Remember, these dinner meetings are educational events. I've always thought it that way. This is like 22 years I've been doing dinner meetings, and I say there should be some hands-on activities because that's how we learn. And just a reminder, good advice for everyone, please update your curriculum vitae or resume or wherever you're keeping a list of all the events you attend. Please do that immediately tonight. Otherwise, if you wait till your certification is due, you're going to send me an email and say, hey, Ford, I attended a presentation back in February 2021. What was that? And I'll say, I asked you to update your own file that night. That's the best way to keep track. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to update my curriculum vitae to show that I did this presentation. Immediately update it. Weeks from now, if you say you're going to wait till next Sunday, it won't get done.
By the way, Mike, I'm going to put a link in the chat window for everyone where they can download a CEU certificate so that they can save it and then update later right after the meeting.
Thank you. So we will have proof. So that will serve as a reminder to them. Thank you so much, Ken. Greatly appreciated.
And a survey. I'll put that link in there too. All right, sorry, go ahead.
So in addition to our annual plan, you have a short-term detailed plan. So I might decide for the year 2021, maybe I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Well, in the shorter term, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to try and lose about a pound a month, and I could actually shave off, if it was actually 13, 14 ounces, that would put me on track to lose 12 pounds over the course of the year. So you have the longer term goals and then the short term targets, and you must write them down. In fact, when it comes to diets, write them down and put them on the fridge. All right, that's the way to make it work. Too many of us have these aspirations or ideals or things that we dream of, but we never put the plan into action. You got to put pen or pencil to paper and write it down. And I'm going to share with you the example of Scott Adams. If you are familiar, Scott Adams is the author of the Dilbert comic strip. And he makes fun of the cubicle dwellers that he was at one time back in the 80s. And he wrote down 15 times a day, I will author a comic strip. I will author a comic strip. I will author a comic strip. He did that 15 times a day to remind himself of his commitment to change his career. And so it's the same thing. If you want to lose weight, if you want to save more money, if you want to advance in your career, if you want to earn a certification, put down your goal and put down a date with it. Force yourself to commit. That's quite typically, that's the toughest part, just making that commitment. I'd like to think of the life cycles from our introductory phase, where we are at the base level of Maslow's hierarchy. So when we are a newborn baby and we are just crying and screaming all the time, what is our concern? So if anybody is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, what are those basic needs we need as a baby? Could somebody please type that in? If anyone's familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, we're getting into a little bit of psychology here, but your needs when you are weeks or months old or an infant are different than you have as an adult. So Ken, do we have anybody filling in the needs at the basic level of Maslow's hierarchy?
Let's see, we have Karen is love. Cynthia says food. Mike D says food, water, and comfort. That is awesome.
Food, yeah, at the basic level, we need to survive. In other words, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy is don't die. Do not die. All right. So you quickly learn how to cry because you know when you cry, someone gives you food or someone changes your diaper or somebody is going to help satisfy your needs for you. So you learn to cry because it works. Now, if your parents do a good job, eventually you get to the point where you don't get rewarded for that anymore. But at a very young age, it's necessary because it means you are either hungry or perhaps you are in pain. So it's survival. But then we eventually start to learn things. We become what I call a walkie-talkie. That is a toddler. You learn to walk, you learn to talk, you learn to communicate. You enroll in public school and you learn basic things like reading and writing and language skills. And eventually, when you get to junior high school or high school, you will start making choices about what your major is and perhaps making plans for college or vocational school or learning on the job training. And then at the point where we have the mature phase, maybe it's no longer public school, but we can continue to learn in corporate training, or we learn to teach ourselves. That is so much different these days. There's so much information, or I could say misinformation on the internet, but there's the opportunity to learn for ourselves. And I got to tell you, I'm so impressed with some YouTube videos that I've learned to do car repairs or plumbing repairs. They are such high quality. And it's the type of things I said, man, this is really high quality stuff. So there's the need to know at the introductory or growth phase. We say there's things you need to learn. Sometimes at the mature phase, we say it's nice to learn. It's for your own self-satisfaction. It's not because you're working on a diploma or a degree or a certification. It's just maybe you wanted to learn conversational Italian, or maybe you wanted to learn ballroom dancing or soap making or any of these things. I will share one of my earliest experiences in the training field was actually when I was attending community college way back in the 80s. Because they said for my financial aid, they offered me a work study program. And I said, what's this work study? Well, you can work on campus. I said, well, what are the choices? They said, well, you can work in the cafeteria doing dishes. I said, okay. Well, you can work in landscaping, shoveling the sidewalks, mowing the lawn. I said, okay. They said, you can work in the gymnasium, washing the towels and doing the laundry of the boys' basketball team. I said, okay. And they said, well, you could do math tutoring. I said, yeah, oh yeah, this is great. That's much better than real work. So I was just, 18, 19 years old, tutoring at a community college where 75% of the students were adults going back to school or working adults. And one of the experiences was a woman who was working on her associate's degree in general education, and she was taking algebra. And she told me this is the first time she's had a math class since the 1950s. And I said, I can appreciate how this is a challenge. And I said, could I ask, what do you plan to do with your college degree? And she said, Mike, I'm retired. I'm never going to use it. But my lifelong dream was to be a college graduate. So I'm doing it now that I'm retired, just so I can say that I did it. And that is one of the most inspirational experiences that I've ever had in my career as a trainer. And I always think back to that. She knew that she wasn't going to use this at work, but that was a lifelong dream. and she was converting it from a dream to a reality.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, you have a couple others. There's also someone channeling their inner Rolling Stones. They have shelter.
Give me
And
shelter.
also
Mhm,
input, output control. Input and
mhm.
output control. Sorry. All right. Back to you.
Thank you for that, Ken. So the choices we make in life, and I've noticed there are some people that tend to be more assertive and they make life happen. Sometimes others of us let life happen to them. We don't really take a very assertive role. We're much more passive. We take whatever job is tossed our way. But as I said before, I believe in having control of your life and responsibility and making a plan. So we choose our career. Now, I understand there are limitations. So as much as I want to play center field for the New York Mets, and as much as they need a center fielder, that's probably not going to happen. Although I got to say, I do think I'm better than some of the choices they've had over the past couple of years. But you choose within range. I know how a lot of people say pursue your passion. Let's be realistic. Ford's passion is to play center field for the New York Mets. It ain't going to happen. If you are familiar with Mike Rowe of Tough Jobs, there's a YouTube clip in which he says, look, it's great if you find a career you enjoy, but let's appreciate the fact not everyone's going to get that opportunity because number one, who says anybody's paying for that labor skill? And number two, who says you're any good at it? So we do have some constraints there. So there are limitations to all choices, but we do have a very wide range. Every individual has skill sets, whether it's left brain or right brain, personal skills, technical skills. Everybody has a wide value of choices, especially in the United States of America. And within those career choices, you have a choice of employers. And I understand at any given time in the job market, there may be constraints, you might not have as many choices, but if you do lifelong planning for success, you will maximize the opportunity that it's more your choice versus the employer's choice. We choose our family. Okay, so you're saying as far as my life's partner, husband or wife, choice to have children. And you may say, well, hey, Ford, I didn't choose my parents. Well, I'd like to think they at least chose you. And maybe you didn't choose your brother, your sister, your uncles, your aunts. I will say this much, my personal belief, I do not automatically hang around with blood relatives on the holidays just because I'm related to them. I do not feel that is forced upon me. I may have family members who are jerks. Now, could be you all do too. Now, the question is, do you hang around with them because it's the holidays and fake it? I don't. I'm honest. If anybody in my family member is not somebody I would hang around with as a neighbor or friend or coworker, then I don't automatically pal around with them and fake it because that's being dishonest, not only to them, but it means I'm not being true to myself. And I will further extend that by saying there are members of my family I do enjoy and do appreciate. And I don't wait until Thanksgiving or Christmas to show them my affection. So my choice of hanging around family has nothing to do with holidays. It's got to do, I either appreciate their company or I do not. And of course, our friends. And I will share, over the course of my lifetime, I have become, if you say divorced friends, or there are friends who I realize they're not the type of people who I wish to have in my life. It might be kids you grew up with in high school or college, and you eventually realize they're making poor choices in their life. Do not let friends make poor choices that interrupt your capability to make nice choices. So it is okay to part ways with friends if your lives go in different directions. Please do not associate with negative people. And then choosing where we live, East Coast, West Coast, even choosing to live in a different country. You make choices, you take control of your life. And I mentioned, how there's some former friends I don't hang around with too much. They are the type of people who would believe the items on this list are not a choice. They would say, well, I had to take this job. I have to work for this company. I'm stuck with my family. I have the same friends for the past 20, 30 years. I didn't get to pick where I live. That's dysfunctional, and it's avoiding responsibility and accountability. And again, now I'm not going to say total choice. Doesn't mean you can say, just like I mentioned with playing center field for the Mets, well, you can rightly argue, well, Ford, I don't get to live in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Bel Air. All right. But you do have some wide range of choices that you are responsible for. And the most important one, even if there's times in your life you were stuck with a crappy job, living in a small, crappy apartment, maybe in the short term, there wasn't much you could do about it. But the one thing you absolutely can control from the minute you get out of bed every single day is your attitude towards it. So even if in the short term, life's rough, you got laid off, the bills are piling up, it's still your choice whether to retain a positive attitude, look forward to the future. And that's when strategic planning for your life becomes even more important. It's interesting, the friends who I've encouraged to take control of their life, and I've talked about things like budgeting. Friends, I can't tell you how many times I heard a friend go, well, I don't have much money, so I don't need a budget. And I said, do you really hear the words coming out of your mouth? You don't have much money, so you don't need a budget? Who needs a budget more? Somebody who's living hand to mouth or Jeff Bezos, all right? The more you're struggling, the less money you have, the more important budgeting becomes and having a plan. And I would also say that should be a kick in the butt to advance your career in education. That should be more motivation to take control of your life. Be prepared. We'll have individual exercises here. I'm going to talk about different conflicts that exist. We can think about the textbook theory about what works in practice. Some of us who are Apex instructors know how often this comes up in class where a student says, okay, Ford, that's what your textbook says. Now, how does it really happen on the manufacturing floor? We can also talk about the old way of doing things versus the new way of doing things. And maybe what we used to consider reality, we learn was not, or maybe it was true at one time and it's not anymore. Like it used to be settled science that the world was flat. So I'm not a big fan when I hear somebody say settled science. Okay, you mean today? Well, maybe it's different a week from now. We can also have a conflict in terms of our risk assessment. And I would dare suggest if you want to win big in life, you're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to go for the gusto and not be afraid. And this is a personal choice. Some of us may be a degree risk adverse. We take a more conservative approach to life. And I think I did maybe in my 20s and 30s. And looking back in hindsight, I wish I took more risk because it's easiest to do when you're early in your career because you have much more time ahead of you to recoup in case plans don't go well. Time is on your side. So if you're going to be riskier, do it best when you are younger. And again, if you want big rewards, it's going to imply you take bigger risks. We also have a conflict between standardization versus creativity. This ties back into what I said earlier about being purple. Do you want to stand out from the crowd? And that in and of itself is a risk. I've had lots of coworkers who said, who believed, I think their mantra was, do not do a real crappy job, but also don't do a great job. Do just enough to not get noticed by your boss. And they don't do such a horrible job your boss notices you, but don't do such a great job your boss notices you. So they weren't very risky at all. They weren't trying to stand out. So think about where purplosity comes in here. And then the satisfaction versus the yearning. Is there ever a point where you say, well, I've learned enough. I don't need to learn anymore. I'm satisfied with life. This is good enough. So I'm going to create an individual exercise here, and I will attempt to divvy up the audience. Let's see if I figured out how to do this virtually. If you consider yourself to be a real crazy purplosity type, if you think you're already a purple person, then please address the first bullet point, theory versus practice. If the next group, going by your first and last name, if your first and last name both start with vowels, please work on old versus new. If your first name starts with a vowel and last name a consonant, please work on risk versus reward. If your first name starts with a consonant and your second name ends in a consonant, standard versus creativity. And if your first name starts with a consonant, but your last name starts with a vowel, satisfaction versus yearning. So I may not have divvied up the audience into 5 perfect groups, but I hope this will at least work. And I will say, I want you to think about how to resolve the conflict. What are your words of wisdom? How would you resolve the conflict? Please, when you type into the chat, make sure you let Ken know, are you doing, and you don't have to type the whole thing, just do like PVP, implies theory versus practice. OVN would be old versus new. RVR is risk versus reward. And SBC, standard versus creativity. And SBY, satisfaction versus yearning. And going by time, Ken, if I'll ask you to exercise discretion and try to find at least one of each. And I hope we got those rolling in.
It was a question from one person who wanted to know, do you include start both with consonants? So pick a category and give it to them.
If yes, starting both with consonants was standard versus creativity.
Awesome.
So if you consider yourself a purple person, do theory versus practice. If your first and last name both begin with vowels, old versus new. If your first name begins with a vowel and your last name begins with a consonant, you're doing risk versus reward. If both first and last name begin with a consonant, standard versus creativity. And if your first name begins with a consonant and your last name begins with a vowel, satisfaction versus yearning. Please, how would you resolve the conflict? And we are not looking, I thank you in advance, we are not looking for a PhD dissertation. Great if you can be concise. The simple solution is usually the best. I believe that was Occam's razor. And I understand there might not be a perfect resolution. I am reminded of Dr. Thomas Sowell, award-winning economist, who said, there are no solutions to the problems in life, only trade-offs.
Well, here's the first one.
Okay.
Standard versus creativity, sometimes career-driven, and also, Rob, I've got, Mike says creative types, artists, sales, creative types. And then there's TVP from Paul. Theory provides guidance while practice is reality. Nice. And there's Keith with, there is not a clear differentiation between standard versus creativity. Some people can combine both, like standard means a special standard. We can combine with the best of both worlds. So that was cool. And then Mike has standard, accountants, engineers. And then James says, SVC, you can be creative in following a standard. I like that.
Mhm.
And then also you can use, this is Jonathan, you can use your standard as a starting point. Then you will have to be creative at some point to achieve your objective. Angelo says R&R. I always tried to risk intelligently where possible. The reward to my measurement is how much I will risk. And then John has SVZ. I agree with you, Keith. You need to know enough standard to support creativity.
Mhm.
And there's also SVC depends on context. When is creativity needed to solve a challenge, or when does standard approach get the job done? Pick your situations and apply which works best. And I'll read a couple more real quick. For rules and regulations, must keep within the framework of thinking. Should keep you on a steady path. To be creative, open your mind in a liberal view of keeping outside the box. That's from Larry, Mr. Quality. Todd says, TVP, I'm a purple person. I constantly push. Why not? Tempered by what is possible, but pushing the boundaries. Also, satisfaction versus yearning, concerned with the gratification like compensation versus longing or craving like hunger or desire. TVP, not purple yet. The theory is necessary to have an elemental information, but with practice, you understand the idea better. And
Mhm.
there's a bunch, well, there's two more. I'll read you the last two. Find out where the standard came from or what is its basis. And you have to know where you are starting from before you can chart a course somewhere else. And the last one was Aaron, RVP, risk, moving and living new unknown state. Reward equals enjoying your new life, start in a new location and a new opportunity. And then Todd wrote, I happen to have purple cow on my desk. So there you go.
So I'm wondering if there is purple milk that comes from that purple cow. So I thank everyone for their participation. That is outstanding, and I agree with all of the comments. We can recognize, some of these tie into our own choices, or it depends what type of career or what type of industry we are in. But we seek to have some sort of balance here. I am reminded of most of my career where I worked at places that were ISO 9000 certified, and it was the constant mantra: follow the documented procedure, follow the documented procedure, follow the documented procedure. But spiced in there somewhere was the boss saying, think outside the box, think outside the box, think outside the box. I go, wait a minute, is this like the yin and the yang? Which is it? You want me to follow procedure? You want me to think outside the box? And what it was while following the standard procedure, there are still opportunities for some flexibility and creativity. So I think most of the time we're looking for something in the middle between all of these conflicts to be able to resolve them moving forward. So again, thank everyone for the contributions. I am going to suggest SMART goals. And there are several versions of the SMART acronym for goals. So I've picked the ones that I prefer. If you go to like Wikipedia or any website, you Google SMART goals, I think there's like 4 or 5 different versions of what these acronyms or letters stand for. So this was my own personal choice. So we recognize goals, they're performance metrics, or they are critical success factors or key success factors. I am going to say the S for me is strategic, because I recognize it ties in to Michael Ford's vision and personal mission statement. Whatever goals I set up have to tie into that higher level strategy. I also wish that they are measurable, they are quantifiable. You don't just say, well, do a good job. Well, what is good job? What does that mean? I got to have a number, something that I can benchmark against. And I want it to be assignable. So in this case, we're talking, I am assigning it to Michael Ford. Michael Ford is the action item owner, and he has the responsibility and the influence for goals in his personal life. I can say I have worked at places where I was given performance metrics, and nothing I did on the job could influence that. As an example, I was a logistics planner at a distribution center in Binghamton, New York. One of the key metrics I was measured on was back orders getting filled. Well, nobody in sales ever asked me for the dates they were promising customers. So I and my fellow planners would say, how are you holding this date against us? Sales seems to be making these up out of thin air. It's not fair to measure me on something that I cannot control. In my personal life, though, I can control the metrics. And realistic, meaning within reach. I'm a fan of the concept of the stretch goal or the stretch target. In other words, it causes me to reach, so it's forcing me to work, but it is within grasp. So that's how you set your targets. And once you can grab one target, it's time to raise the bar and go to the next one. And these must be timely, or we say time bound or time based. Going back to the concept of me saying, well, I want to lose 12 pounds this year, so a pound a month. So you have your periodic targets, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, and you engage in performance review in your personal life and take a look at the metrics. See if you're hitting the target. If you are, raise the bar. If you're not, you initiate corrective action. You do a gap analysis and find out, well, why did I miss the target? And it doesn't mean beating yourself up. It just means being honest and saying, how can I improve going forward? Recognizing maybe it was too aggressive of a target. So if I, for the next 5K I run, I'm pretty sure if I say I'm going to do a 16-minute 5K race, that ain't going to happen unless I cheat and I ride a scooter or something. So again, make it realistic. Could someone or multiple people take advantage of this opportunity for audience interaction? I wish to understand a distinction or a contrast. What is the difference between education and training? Or do you think they're the same thing? Are they interchangeable terms? So I'm looking to see a comparison or contrast. What is meant by education and what is meant by training? And I'm really looking for our friends who are in Train the Trainer. This is what we start off with, the first 15 minutes of the class. In fact, I think in the promotional materials, we draw a distinction between education and training. So is education and training considered to be the same thing, or do you view them differently?
So we already have some, Mike, answers.
Please do, Ken, and just maybe 2 or 3, please, so
Sure.
we can stick to our time.
Yeah, education equals fundamentals, training equals on the job. Another
Good
one
one.
was education, why, training, and how. And I get another one. Education teaches you how to think in a certain way. Training is on the job and application of theories.
I like all of these answers here. So I'm going to suggest that education answers these questions: why, what, who, where, and when. It provides a transfer of knowledge or facts. So it means you're learning facts or you're learning knowledge. Training answers the question how to do something. So it is a transfer of skills. It is affecting your behavior. You are doing things differently. That is very important. The ultimate measure of successful training is you do things differently. So I've wondered about this when we teach, whether it's APICS or ASQ certification training. Sometimes you think, well, the goal is to finish the class. Well, no, the goal is to pass the certification exam. So you can put those letters on your business card. I think, no, the goal is, do you behave different at work? Because that would be the true value to your employer, the value to your customers, and the value to your career. If my company pays for a dozen planners to get APIC certified, they all get certified, and they keep doing their jobs the same way, what was it worth? Now they're all going to come into HR and say, geez, we need raises. APIC said we make $5,000 more per year for the certification. No way. I want to see that we reduced inventories, we reduced lean time, we increased throughput, we improved our yields. That is the change in behavior that gives you the concrete results that justifies the training.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, Ken.
Keith had, I just have to read this one, because this will get everyone smiling too. You don't mind if I read this, I assume, Keith, because you sent it to everyone. It says, my daughter came home from school one day and said she had received sex education. Keith said, that is okay, but I draw the line at training.
Yes.
That was cute.
I have heard a version of that also involves drugs. My teenager received drug education versus my kid received drug training. So you can appreciate the distinction there. I also like to use the example. I had driver's education in high school. On Tuesdays, we watched these safety films from the 1950s, which were horrible. On Thursdays, we went out to the parking lot behind the school and actually drove in cars around the parking lot, eventually, by the end of the semester, driving around the roads or the highway. So education was reading the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles rules and guidelines and watching the safety films. Driver training was getting behind the wheel of a car. So I thank everyone for that. And the key thing here is transfer of skills is what leads to continuous improvement. So we discussed the need, just like companies do strategic planning. If you want lifetime success, please do strategic planning, create a vision and a mission statement. And I wish to be clear, when I say if you want success in life, please do not read all of those S's as dollar signs. That's not what it means. If that's how you define success, then how much is ever enough? You'll be disappointed as you go through life. And I can also think of friends of mine who perhaps focus too much on career and salary. And I think of the times that they were working overtime or they were on travel assignments. And hey, you missed your little daughter pitching a no-hitter in Little League. How much salary is worth missing that, those opportunities? So I'm not going to say success is strictly salary. We recognize that our perspectives change as we go from introduction to growth to the mature to the sunset stage of our life. And throughout our life, we make choices with regard to our career, our family, our friends, our loved ones, who we work for. We understand there will be conflicts between theory versus practice, risk versus reward, old versus new, standard versus customization, and also the yearning versus satisfaction. We have learned this evening techniques for resolving those conflicts, but understand conflicts occur. That's okay. It gives us challenge in our life. And we're going to implement SMART goals to measure our success and periodically review those. And we make a choice. Is it education or is it training, or perhaps it's a combination of both? I would now like the opportunity for one more exercise. I'm going to solve every problem in your personal or professional life in 7 steps. I created a 7-step process because I think that's the way to get into the Apex Hall of Fame. They've got all these 7-step processes throughout the certification materials. The first thing I will ask you to do with your pencil and paper, list all of your personal or professional problems. So I will give the audience an opportunity, whether it is a personal problem or a professional, or perhaps in some cases, it's an overlap. Perhaps it's personal issues overlapping to our professional life, or it's stuff on the job that you're taking home and sharing with your family or your life's partner. That is definitely a big problem when we don't keep those separate. So an opportunity, list your personal
Here's the first one,
and/or
Mike.
professional. I'm not looking for sharing here, just to clarify.
Okay.
But thank
Well,
you.
they're putting them in the chat window, so you can look if you want.
I'm asking to list these on a sheet of paper.
We have to solve them. That's the problem.
I can solve them without knowing what they are.
Oh, okay.
So, the next step, cross anything off past number 5. All right. Life is short and your time on this planet is precious. You got more than 5 large problems in your life. I'm not sure if you understand the definition of a problem. So we don't sweat the small stuff. This reminds me of what's on my business card. I only want the tough jobs. All right. Number 3, cross off anything that can be solved with money. Trust me, friends, anything that can be solved with money is not a problem. If you've ever had really problems in life, you know, a bank account was not going to solve it. Cross off anything that happened within the past 3 months. I guarantee you, a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now, you won't even remember it. Be patient. It is one of the virtues. Cross off anything that only applies to you. All right. If you really have a big problem, then that affects more than one person. In other words, it affects other family members, friends, coworkers, potentially neighbors. So anything that only applies to you gets crossed off the list. Cross off anything that is a fact. A fact is not a problem. Facts cannot be solved. How often have I heard, whether I'm doing training in upstate New York or Pennsylvania, I keep hearing, oh, our problem is cheap labor in China. Well, how exactly would you solve for that? Are you going to run for premier of the Communist Party and institute a higher minimum wage? Cheap labor in China is a fact. It's not a problem. You cannot solve it. So anything that is a fact, cross it off. Just accept it and move on. If somehow, some way, you still have any problems left, well, I'll take them. But when you leave this session, you got to take someone else's list with you. Trust me, the grass is very rarely greener on the other side of the fence. The genesis for this problem-solving technique actually originated over 35 years ago when I was working nights in a warehouse, and I learned that a coworker had a 5-year-old son who was undergoing chemotherapy treatments for leukemia. Anytime in the past 35 years, when I thought I was dealing with crap in life, when I thought I had a problem, I think of a 5-year-old boy going through chemotherapy. And friends, every problem I thought I had magically disappears and melts away. If in fact you or a loved one is facing a challenging disease, potentially terminal, then I apologize to you. I did not solve all your problems. But I can tell you this, you and your family will be in my prayers this evening. My vision for 2020, 2021, I said 2020 to survive, 2021 to thrive. I got through it. Life sucked. My work was cut down a lot, but I kept a positive attitude. I said, I know it's going to change. Work is picked up so much. 2021 is starting out one of the best years of my career. And I think it's tied into the fact that I kept a positive attitude. Any last questions or comments? And I know we're at the time, but I can hang out. I don't have to run away. So any last